Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. For those who've been hanging with me some time, and welcome to those who are new to my channel. I'm Adele Levine, intuitive and medium. Obviously, I'm doing something different. I have some great guests that I know all of you are going to be so excited about. I have the Bigfoot Collectors Club podcast. Michael Mcmillian, the host, you might know him from a few shows, True Blood, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Perry Mason. Also have Bryce Johnson. Boom. You might know him from Pretty Little Liars, popular, and Expedition Bigfoot. And their super producer, Riley Bray, who's made a transformation over this time. I almost didn't recognize him. And when he's not producing, he's doing his little rock and roll band, Spindrift. Not little, lot. And they have agreed to come on my humble channel. This is the Bigfoot Collectors Club podcast. Boys, thank you guys for coming so much. I really, really appreciate it. It's really kind of you.
Thanks for having us.
No, seriously, you guys, like, I want everybody who's watching from different places, don't think everybody in LA is this cool, because I grew up here, so I can trash it. They are not. These guys are unusual, so don't get excited that everybody is this cool. They're very
Riley
cool.
is actually from LA.
Yeah.
Oh, Riley. So me and Riley, you agree, right? Come on. We can say it, but Riley's kinder than me, probably.
Everybody's cool. In their own way.
You guys are both from the SoCal chill vibes ilk. Like you're the good vibes, good SoCal vibes.
Yeah, we're like the people. Yeah, there's like a group of us that are truly like a little bit more on the hippie, like chill vibe people. I say that. So I brought you guys on because I've been on their podcast a few times, and now the roles are reversed. I want to interview them about aliens, of course, and about UFOs and all of the stuff you guys been talking about this summer, which has been a wet, hot alien summer for you guys, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
How did that get started? How did you guys first of all, before we get into that, tell everybody a little bit about your podcast and what it's about.
Sure. So I can just recite what we usually say at the top of every episode. We're a podcast where we talk to amazing guests like Adela about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. So in the first half of the show, we'll have a guest on, an actor, a writer, or a paranormal expert, like we consider Adela. We'll talk to them about how they got into that world, or if they have a weird story that they could never explain. And then in the second half of the show, we usually do a story of high strangeness. So we take something like from history, we'll do like the Bell Witch, or we'll do the Flatwoods Monster, or the big Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot film. And Bryce and I tend to alternate each week telling that story. We're getting it's becoming a little bit more interactive and more like a radio play as the stuff goes along. And then Riley edits that together and adds, right now it's not live because of the pandemic and we're all doing this from our individual homes, but Riley brings in this beautiful score and backs up the high strangeness with like some like really like getting into the John Carpenter level like soundtrack. So that's basically what we do. And I guess I should say we try to keep it light. We try to keep it funny. Apple Podcast still doesn't have a paranormal category, so we just call ourselves a comedy. I mean, because we think it's funny.
Yeah, they don't. They have spiritual, I think, as much, right? Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, paranormal seems to be,
popular,
very popular and jumping back into the zeitgeist. So I'm very surprised that they don't have a paranormal division. But hey, we're armchair cryptozoologists and alien experts, and we love to have fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously, so we're pretty comfortable being in that comedy division.
You guys are very funny. Very funny.
Oh,
and I hear about it because I read people, right, who call me and read, and I hear about a lot about you guys.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, no, you guys are hilarious in taking a subject that people a lot of times take themselves too seriously in the paranormal world and the alien world and lightening it up. But what I wanted to ask you guys about, not to interrupt you, sorry, Bryce, but I wanted to ask you about the Wet Hot Alien Summer and get into the Roswell, episodes you did. because you guys did something different on those episodes, which I'll ask you about. But first, how did the Wet Hot Alien Summer get started?
Well, I'll say
I know,
this.
but
I'll say this. I had an idea. I'd wanted to do, because we were kind of in the pandemic and in a bit of a funk, and just to kind of play up. We've been playing around a little bit, like last Halloween, we sort of did all sort of traditional Halloween stories, or stories based on like, where does the jack-o'-lantern come from? What's the story about the headless horseman? And so I thought it would be really fun to do a summer-long event where we only focused on high strangeness stories involving aliens and UFOs. And I actually had an idea of what we were going to call this event. And as I was pitching it to Bryce and Riley goes, great, we can call it Wet Hot Alien Summer. And I was like, all right, well, that's way better than what I had. And it just immediately stuck. And we're like, yep, that's it. And then it ended up really, that theme was perfect because Bryce and Riley recorded an amazing song. We had a theme song that went with it, if you guys want to talk about that.
Yeah,
that's what I was. Yes, go.
The song happened because of a bizarre glitch when we were recording in an episode. Right as Bryce said the word strange, it repeated on loop in our headphones. It just went strange, 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 strange. And we like immediately we all heard that. At first we cracked up, of course, because like,
well, Bryce couldn't hear anything because he
Bryce,
got kicked off.
Yeah.
John Gabris, comedian John
I get
Gabris,
chills when you guys are talking about it.
He was our guest, and he was like, "Oh my God, what the hell? What's going on? What is happening?" He thought we were like setting him up for something.
Yeah, but it was like too good. It was like, well, this obviously has to become a song. So that became the first release off of this imaginary band that's grown out of the podcast called Club Bryce, which is based on Bryce's glory days in his Hollywood apartment. And so it's a paranormal EDM dance banger, and it's we released it on Spotify and iTunes and all that. We started our own record label for it. And the other fun thing about it was the process of making this all happened in about 4 or 5 days total, from the time it happened to starting a record label, making the song, and releasing it, which is like crazy for music.
Go ahead.
It's such a fun track, and it just played into this whole thing this summer where we were just like, this summer was obviously a bummer for everyone, and we just wanted to do something fun and like reclaim the summer a little bit. And so that was all just part of it.
It's hard not to think that it wasn't paranormally manifested. I mean, so often in the paranormal, electronics get somehow manipulated or fooled with. So for the fact that it landed right on that word strange and just kept repeating, that's never happened before or since.
Yeah.
And I think even Riley got a few comments, was like, you've got to make this into a tune. And it's funny.
Might say we had a ghostwriter.
Yeah, totally. My favorite part is like telling like a friend or something. I'll be like, yeah, check out iTunes. I got a song on there. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, it's called Completely Absorbed by the Strange. And they're like, what? Huh? How? Why?
And like the first lyric in the song is Thunderbirds.
Yeah, we sampled a bunch of Bryce's, my favorite things Bryce says. Yeah, and we put it all in there.
I was listening to it and I was like, I thought it was a bit. I was like, okay, guys, they're doing this isn't real. But then your reaction, I was like, this is like really happening. I was like, what? I definitely thought it was like planned until you guys start freaking out. And then I was like, this is awesome. This is way for sure paranormal. Like, I'm going to believe that.
I will. I just have to say,
here we go. The grounding, yes.
For the first half of the summer, Bryce's Wi-Fi sucked. That's true. So we did lose him, but we never lost him in the way that we lost him in that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I always tell people, like, spirits and paranormal thing, they use what we have. So we use what we're using. So yeah, his Wi-Fi could suck, but they can use that to like make something happen at that time.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and,
I get
and
what
it was
you're
on the
saying.
word. It wasn't even just the word strange. It was on the word high strangeness. Like
strangeness.
So it's like it's the biggest theme of our show. And
we should talk about what that is. So for us, high strangeness is really an umbrella term that that sort of takes in everything that's sort of outside the realm of normalcy when it comes to stuff like UFOs, ghosts, or Bigfoots. For instance, if you see like an alien coming out of a spacecraft and and it's toying with an abacus or something, or like doing something totally weird.
Now you're just writing fan fiction, Bryce. Just say pancakes.
Pancake. Oh yeah, absolutely. True. There's a famous case where it's called the Joe Simonton pancake case, where an alien spacecraft landed in the back of this guy's yard's farm, and the door opened. And 3 small beings came out and they communicated to him telepathically that they wanted some water. And so he goes and grabs him some water, and he's kind of like, I wonder what they want this for. He gives him the bucket of water, and he can see one of the beings like cooking what looks like a pancake on a grill inside the spacecraft. And and obviously he's thinking, what the fuck is happening? What are these people doing? What are these things doing? And they offer him, they're like, would you like to try one? And he's like, sure, I'll take a space cake. And they hand him 3 of these space pancakes, and he takes a bite into one. He said it tasted horrible, like cardboard, but he kept a couple of them. The spaceship, the door closed up and it flew off, and he reported it to his local sheriff, who came out. They saw the marks where the craft had landed. He still had the space cakes. In fact, that sheriff that he gave it to sent him to the FDA to have them analyzed. And they're like, these are pretty benign space cakes. I mean, there's a few interesting aspects about them. They don't contain any salt whatsoever. We couldn't.
Bryce, you're so passionate about these space cakes.
That's
he's so passionate. And then Michael's face is like,
no.
I'm like, chill. What do you guys think? Like, what's your conclusion on that story?
Well, I want to
something like that.
If I can add this to Bryce's, the important thing about the salt, and I actually heard John E.L. Tenney, who's a wonderful paranormal investigator. Your audience would love his stuff.
Definitely.
He actually was telling this story recently when we had the virtual PhenomenaCon event happening. And I think we talked about this on our episode as well, but the no salt thing is really interesting because salt is historically in folklore deadly or harmful to the fae, to fairies.
Right.
So in this weird
And
UFO
spirits.
experience, there is, that's why oftentimes in, spell casting, everything, you have salt circles to protect you from malevolent spirits or other entities that you don't want crossing over into your Adela. I think you know more about this than I do, but it is interesting that the pancakes that they were eating had no salt in them. And also this tradition in folklore and fairy folklore of humans being offered food.
That's right.
From entities from another realm is a very, very big theme. And so it's funny that here's this weird UFO story that up to a point sounds like sort of your standard close encounter. A craft lands, a farmer comes out. It's like, well, who the hell are these little guys? But then crosses over unknowingly to the farmer into this realm of fairy folklore as well. So that is like a perfect high strangeness story because it's just sort of too weird to explain.
And more than that, I mean, it's connective tissue. It's really sort of connecting these things together to make the audience member think, hey, perhaps there's a larger world of high strangeness taking place here. Perhaps the fae, the fairies, folklore, and aliens are somehow related, and we're not the first to say this. There have been great researchers that have, looked into this in more depth and have come away sort of with an understanding that, somehow, some way, all these paranormal things, and you can include Bigfoot into this, seem to be have relationships to each other and seem to be somehow connected in some way. And we find that absolutely fascinating. And that's such a great thing about, it makes the paranormal fun. I mean, getting served pancakes. I mean, so often when we think of aliens and abduction and visitations, we think of the darker side.
Yeah, it's all eye drilling.
Right. But, some of this stuff is just so fun. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I actually seen something like that. It was what people would describe as a fairy, but the face looked like, the best way I could describe was alien-like. So I've always thought there's got to be something crossing between those things. Like, I don't think they're separated. I mean, you guys are already answering some of the questions I was going to ask, so this is awesome. So I don't have to I was going to ask you about
Yeah.
this
And I'll just
type
say
of
too,
thing.
the gifting goes hand in hand with the Bigfoot phenomenon as well. So many
Oh, really?
oh, absolutely. So gifting is a huge part of Bigfoot communication amongst Bigfoot researchers. And it's a strange phenomenon. You know, people will leave toys, marbles, and often food. And in return, they'll get strange things back from nature, feathers, little mice wrapped in grass, some of the strangest things. And again, I mean, here's this
And marbles, right? Like
yeah,
Bigfoot
and
hands
marbles,
out
yeah.
marbles, which is so strange.
Yes, that there it has been reported, and so it's a very strange phenomenon that takes place in the Bigfoot universe as well. So it makes you go, hey, you know, maybe there's something, you know, tied with these things and fairy folklore and alien phenomenon as well.
Do you guys think that they're more what you would call like earthly realm type beings versus to interdimensional type beings? Because
Well,
it's such a earthly thing of like food and,
yeah,
you know.
why can't it be both? You know, we know
Yeah.
that these creatures leave physical evidence. We get footprints, trackways
Mhm.
that cannot be made by what's called wooden stompers, you know, because there's spontaneous impressionistic type of movement. So it's not just one wooden stomper creating it.
Right.
Thousands of people witness seeing this creature all across the world, not just here in the United States. And people have collected scat, hair samples, and you know, so yeah, obviously this creature can leave an indelible impression within the physical universe. But then on the flip side of that coin, you have eyewitnesses describing this creature dematerializing right in front of their eyes, or even shape-shifting from like what might look like a tree stump, and then it stands up and reveals itself as one of these creatures.
Or
So
stepping in and out of portals that appear out of thin
stepping
air.
in and out of
Right.
portals.
What,
Yeah, that's
Bryce?
right.
You said a phrase you used a moment ago. I don't think I've heard you say wood stomper. What are you talking about?
Oh,
Those
so
stop.
the idea of a
Yeah.
wood stomper is what a hoaxer would use to
Oh,
create
like the
so
plank.
yeah, like a
Yeah.
wooden
Okay,
somebody would carve
Yeah.
up what looked
Fake.
like a
Yeah.
Bigfoot foot, and
gotcha.
they would strap those to their feet and they would walk around. Now, what's interesting is I've done that. I've tried that. Is so filming Willow Creek.
Of course you have.
It was an
Just
experiment.
in his backyard.
It was an
Yeah.
experiment. So for the
He's
I
in
movie,
his
can't make it to
car.
your soccer game today, honey. I have Daddy's got a science experiment.
so I did a found footage film written and directed by Bobcat Goldthwait called Willow Creek, and in it in it he wanted a Bigfoot footprint. So he went about creating one of these stompers to get like a footprint impression that we would film. And for behind the scenes, you know, I wanted to sort of see what it would be like to try and actually walk in these things and create not just a footprint, which is what we used in the movie, but an actual trackway. So a trackway might consist of like anywhere between, you know, 4 to a couple hundred footprints, left, right, left, right.
Oh, right.
And so I put our cinematographer, his name is Evan, into these wooden stompers, and I'm recording it. It's on the special features of the Willow Creek DVD if you can get a hold of it. And you could just watch him have the hardest time trying to keep these on his feet, trying to go to the next foot, trying to create a big gap between his next footprint. And I mean, he fell over one time. I mean, he couldn't even get three steps into it without falling over and go, I quit. And I went and looked at those footprints, and the impression that they made were like maybe a millimeter, maybe a centimeter. And this is soft sand. So when you start to see these trackways that are impressed 2 to 3 inches deep into the earth,
Uh-oh, he froze.
insinuates that
See, the trickster's
somewhere
back. This is
between
what
800
happens.
to 1200 pounds.
It's okay. It's
Oh, did I
back.
cut out?
Just right.
back.
Wait, just at that part. You're back. That's
Oh,
okay.
good.
So
Um,
you were just saying about the 2 to 3 inches deep shows that there was a lot of weight. It has to be a lot of weight behind those footprints.
Yeah, it insinuates a creature ranging from anywhere from 800 to 1200 pounds. So,
Wow.
So do you think then, well, I mean, I was going to ask you about Bigfoot. So you feel that it's maybe a combination of both, like they're manifesting into a physical form, maybe through a portal, maybe through another dimension, that kind of thing, maybe similar to all other types of things that are paranormal, like spirits or aliens. Is that what you're saying? You
I
guys
have a
think?
working hypothesis that this is not just a flesh and blood creature. I mean, there's too many high
Yeah, I
strangeness
believe that.
details that go reported, and a lot of people don't like to deal with those stranger details. It doesn't fit in their Bigfoot box,
Right.
so they don't want to talk about it. But these are the things that we at the Bigfoot Collectors Club love talking about because it maybe possibly can help us get a better understanding of this phenomenon.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the thing that's undeniable about all of these stories, whether you're dealing with ghosts, aliens, or Bigfoot, is there is, like Bryce said, a physical aspect to these encounters. There's always landing pad marks or footprints or sometimes hair samples or scat or sounds. Sometimes the craft appear to be made of nuts and bolts and metal, and sometimes they're glowing balls of light. Uh, but but then they all seem to, at certain points in the lore, defy physics and defy our logic. So I don't know. I'm agnostic about all this stuff. I really don't know how to wrap it all up. I have said this repeatedly. I love the stories, and I think
Right.
it's important to keep the stories alive and to encourage people to report their experiences, one so that we have them, and one so that we can compare them to other experiences, and then two to help help destigmatize this stuff, because I still think that people are scared to share these stories because they're afraid of looking crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that was one of the things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Riley.
Oh, I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead.
building off of what Michael's saying there, it's like, for me, I haven't made my mind up about this, whether it's interdimensional, it's nuts and bolts, it's a psychic phenomenon. But what is certain is that there are so many people that are having these experiences, and that's what's really
Yeah.
interesting to me, and that opens up all these larger questions about, like, what is consciousness and what is the mind and what is reality, and how is it defined by our experience of it. And that's where the paranormal becomes this really interesting lens to look at all of those questions.
And if it is a manifestation of some trauma or some mental episode,
Mhm.
that's important too. Why does the brain manifest certain experiences to be an alien abduction? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's important. All of it's important, I think, in terms of figuring out exactly, because we don't have an explanation. Science still doesn't have an explanation exactly why these
Right.
things happen to people.
I always say that I think it's a science we don't understand quite yet. So I feel like
Absolutely.
that's why when you're asking questions, isn't that what we do when we're
Mhm.
trying to research something? And saying absolutes, you can't say absolutes totally yet. We're not there yet.
Well,
No.
and I think what science has always had had a problem with when it comes to the paranormal is that it can't be recreated in a laboratory, and
Right.
and this is the problem. You can't pin down the paranormal, and it doesn't do what you say when you want to say it. Now,
Mhm.
Terence McKenna, a famous shamanistic lecturer and who was fascinated with the idea of psychedelic mushrooms, he said, "Hey, look, if you want this thing to behave on time, all you got to do is take 5 dried grams, and
Oh, of course.
those beings
We're
will."
not. I'm not promoting. No, I'm just kidding.
No, and
This
but
is
he was saying
Bryce. Contact him.
there's a
Yeah. Go ahead.
connection there. There's a
Yeah.
connection there to strange anomalous experiences. But he was like, that is a way you can have repeatability.
Yeah,
But
and there's people
Mhm.
like Dr. Straussman, who was studying DMT and really wanted to do it under controlled environment in a scientific manner, to go, hey, we might be able to induce the state of mind that allows paranormal occurrences to take place. So there seems to also be that. I think we talked about it on your first episode, Adela. Bryce talked about the pineal gland, and this
Oh yeah.
idea that we might actually have these built-in receptors in our brain.
Right.
This is something that Graham Hancock in his book Supernatural also puts forth, that that there is an amount of the chemical DMT already present in our brain, and
Mhm.
sometimes that may or may not get stimulated, or the brain may overproduce it, causing us sort of to allow our brains to become antenna to receive interactions with ghosts or aliens, and maybe, as far as we know, entities like Bigfoot.
That's exactly
we
right.
just don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really cool theory. I do like to think that there is some higher intelligence, whether to go way back to your question, Adela, whether it's earth based, if it's some sort of elemental force that has a direct connection to the energy of this planet and has existed here eons before humankind evolved. When I hear stories about the Bell Witch, this sort of disembodied, powerful spirit that lived in a cave on very ancient land that was always considered by First Nations people to be sort of very like not cursed, but they haunted or just highly active, I'll say, area of the country in Tennessee. That to me says that, okay, there's something else here that might be some sort of natural elemental energy or consciousness that is also engaging with us as well. It may not be from, as Bryce says, Zeta Reticuli. It may not even be from a neighboring dimension. It might all be coming from Earth itself.
I agree. I always, when people are always asking me about these things, I say I feel like it's like an onion where one layer, there's another layer. It's interconnected. It's not like coming here far away, or at least when I deal with the spirit world, I feel like it. I absolutely don't see it as somewhere else.
Right, but
I just don't.
I also don't think it's mutually exclusive. I also think we could also be being visited by advanced intelligences from other planets that are a million years ahead of us and have figured how to bend space and time and get to distant star systems by going around the theory of relativity or shortcutting through some type of wormhole, like in Star Trek or Star Wars. But I think it's all of it, it could be.
Well, that was like one of my questions, but then you answered it. But I was going to say, is it only interdimensional, or is it physical, like something coming from the future, or these robots or drones being made? Is it both? I tend to feel it's got to be both. I feel it, just like there can't be just a limit on everything, right? Couldn't it be like, which brings me to your specials, you guys, the 3 episodes you did on Roswell. So isn't that a perfect example of that was very focused on the physical?
Yeah.
So can you guys talk about your journey with Roswell? Because I know you guys went on a deep dive into that and you did episodes on it. Like, how did you start? Like, where was your brain and thoughts and beliefs to how did you come out away from that?
I think, Riley, you should start first, because part of our experiment in doing this was to tell. Riley sort of became our proxy or our stand-in audience member. We're like, okay, we're going to try to tell the Roswell story, really break it down over 3 episodes, which we'd never done before. Didn't have a special guest.
It was awesome. I loved it.
And so Riley didn't know too much about it going into it.
I really didn't. Yeah. I mean, I sort of just knew your basic like pop culture references of it. One time I drove through Roswell on tour, but it was late on a Sunday and everything was closed. I bought some kitschy alien glasses, but that's like about my knowledge of it. I mean, I'd known, it was like something in the 40s crashed and they said it was a weather balloon, and that was, I guess that I'd accepted that it was not a craft, but I never thought necessarily the cover story was true. I just sort of, it was like a big open question mark, and that I hadn't really thought about too deeply. And then going through these episodes week after week, and also, I mean, it was fun to watch these two like delve into the research, because they just really they like went method on it of being paranormal researchers, like slowly sort of wound into their dens of books and deep caves of the internet, but they emerged with like this amazing story. And by the time it was over, I can definitely say I don't believe that was a weather balloon. And what it was, though, I'm still not 100% sure. I have sort of 2 theories. One is that it was some high-level government test gone awry, and that's why the people in the base even didn't know what they were looking at. So it was still a cover-up, but a cover-up of something high-tech, futuristic weapon kind of man-made thing. Futuristic for the time, of course, but or they recovered something that is not of human origin, and that does seem possible. And all these people that were involved in their earnest testimonies about it are pretty compelling, and there's meat on the bones of that story for sure. So I know a lot more about it, but now I also have more questions about it. So
Totally. That's really what happens as we've been doing this podcast is like, man, I know so much more than I did going into this as a fan of this shit. Oh, excuse me, stuff. Probably should not swear. Sorry, I forget we're not on our
It's
show.
okay. It's okay.
But now I've lost my train of thought. But then you are just left with like, gosh, this stuff is so much weirder than you think. It's weird. It gets
Truly.
Yeah.
weirder and weirder and weirder.
Right.
What
I
I
have a
loved about
question.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
I was gonna add on top of that. What I loved about doing the Roswell
Yeah.
3-part series was, so after doing our podcast for so long, we were starting to like get into like the idea of, oh man, maybe these things are ultra terrestrials or interdimensionals, because you have the couple different camps. One is the nuts and bolts camp, which
Right.
these are metallic ships from other planets being
Right.
piloted by extraterrestrials. And then you have the other camp, which is, perhaps this is some type of psychic phenomena or some interdimensional type of entity. And once we were getting that way, we were like, oh yeah, there's just too much shit for this just to be like, some little alien traveling from Zeta Reticuli. But then you hit Roswell and then you're like, okay, something landed. It was metallic. People saw pilots, alien beings. So many witnesses said one even survived. You have them describing this material they call it memory metal, that they could crumple as light as paper. They could crumple it up in their hand and then it would like spring back to life. You couldn't cut it. You couldn't burn it. You couldn't smash it. And this is 1947. I don't care what you think the government or our neighbors over in Russia are developing. Nothing was like that. So, this leads you right back to, hey, perhaps this planet is being visited by a higher intelligence species who can fly in our airspace with impunity. And, when you get down to the basics, that's not that far out of the realm of possibility. I mean, there are umpteen number of stars to the billionth degree. And if we went from walking in a horse and carriage to landing on the moon in 69 years, we're a relatively young human species. Imagine what some other type of creature could do within a 1,000 years advance of us, 2,000, 100,000,
Right.
a million. It's so easy to think that, we don't understand the universe and all of its laws. So
I think the big thing for me with Roswell that I hadn't thought of before, but then when we started hearing descriptions of the alien bodies and how the mouths were just little pockets, I started.
You were weird.
Well,
were you
'cause that-
weirded out by that?
I was.
or-
I mean,
Really hung up on
it
pocket
is
mouth.
sort of a gross horror movie
Pocket
kind of
mouth.
thing, but I was more fascinated by the idea of like, okay, let's stop and think about this. If they don't have mouths for speaking or eating,
or genitalia.
and they don't have genitalia, then maybe these aliens aren't biological entities in the way that we think about them. They seem to be just the right size to pilot these craft. And I'm sort of the mind that, okay, it was something sent from another planet, maybe another dimension, but that the alien, quote unquote, were some type of artificial intelligence or a hybrid between artificial intelligence and biology that were specifically genetically or artificially designed to be the pilots of this craft, because that's the way that they can get these probes or drones to planets that are in a different galaxy or in a different solar system. So there's sort of like, if you think about there's sort of the T2000 or the version of our Mars probe, that they have sort of a humanoid quality, but they're more machine, or the machine is as human as the machine aspect is, if that makes sense.
I love that idea so much. It's that
It makes sense.
it's like a biological technology where it's like the technology has come so far that it's now like writing in like DNA code, and it's technology's refused with nature so they can create these synthetic beings, and it's this super advanced artificial intelligence that has command over it. It's amazing.
Why send a human into a rocket if and risk all like have to get these like astronauts that think about like the astronauts that go into our rockets are like super tough. They're like the toughest, greatest pilots. They have to withstand all sorts of crazy G-force, weightlessness, all this stuff. Now imagine if you could, instead of recruiting those guys, you can just grow them, or you
3D print them.
Yeah. You
or build them.
Build them. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it's sort of I think it's gotta be a combination of machine and humanoid.
I have a question about that I just thought of. Could it be that they would make something based on how they look? Like, for instance, like if a lot of people have seen similar looking, like I know when I've seen them, there's a slit for a mouth. There's really no mouth. There's like a slit. And there's a similarities in seeing different beings. Could those beings make something like we could make something that looks like us, like we're trying to do AI? Totally. Right.
Well, here's a thought, right? And this is I often think about this. If you look at both ends, and one end being Bigfoot, this large bipedal hulking creature, and then on the other end you have this alien, let's call it like an alien gray, small, petite, large brains, and here we are right in the middle, right? So this presents some type of like archetype spectrum. On the one end, you have what we know was our past, like these large hulking Neanderthal creatures in tune with nature. Gigantopithecus, huge muscles.
Living in nature, living
in
nature,
land, opportunistic omnivores. Clothes. Yeah, huge muscles, small brain, big mouth. And then you have at the other end, maybe our future selves, which is large brains, no need to digest or eat much food anymore, no need to sexually reproduce anymore.
Oddly still naked. Oddly, we're the only part.
Always we're the only ones where and then here we are in the middle. So perhaps these represent psychologically speaking, our past and future selves, and here we are sort of stuck in the middle, so it who knows the
evolvement
the
you're basically that's actually interesting. I never thought of that. That's
and
interesting.
Adela, to specifically address your question, there are reports that come from abductees that there are the little grays that are, the 3.5 to 4 feet tall, classic.
And the tall ones.
And then there are the tall ones that to me, I'm like, okay, the tall ones might be the tall grays might be creating the little grays so they can fit into these little ships that need to be just as size, or, that spawn out of the mothership, so it's possible that the tall grays are making the little guys, it's also possible, but both of them are sort of AI, but, biological singularity beings that are created by another alien race. We don't know, or us from the future, or they've replaced us in the future.
We'll know by the end of the year.
We'll know.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I would like to. We need some help.
Gotta wrap this one up.
I have one of the reasons why I wanted to have you guys on, because I've shared with you my experiences, and they're usually kind of psychic, interdimensional, not as popular as people who like the tangible. The only tangible thing I've ever seen is a triangle black craft hovering over, which later, that's another story. Someone in the Air Force that found me after I did a paranormal convention told me that they make them, that our government makes them.
I think those are man-made the more I hear about them. And maybe man-made, designed off something that's off-world technology, but
Do you think that's what my question is, after doing Roswell and kind of believing like, maybe there's a mix, or there's two questions I have. One, I know there's a theory that during that time there was a lot of movies and things put out about spaceships and aliens, and some people believe it was like a collective conscious type of thing where everybody started kind of seeing the same things because it started to get really popular in pop culture. Do you think that that's a theory that some people think, that people just kind of jumped on that, kind of very similar to what I see in the work I do in the paranormal world and spiritual world?
It's possible. And I think I know how Bryce wants to address this question as well. So I'll let him answer.
I have to ask.
Sure.
But I'll say, to kind of set where I think Bryce is going to go with this. It's possible, sure. Like, we really don't know what the long-term effects of mass media and mass pop culture have on the human brain. You know, they say when Betty and Barney Hill had their
Right.
abduction experience in the 60s, there had been an episode of the Outer Realm. I think it was the Outer Realms. It was the one that wasn't the
Outer
Twilight,
Worlds?
the one that was in the Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Where there were aliens on it that looked a lot like alien grays. So skeptics would say, well, they had just seen this on their TV set a few weeks ago, and now they're seeing it in real life. It's possible. We don't really know. You know, there are obviously people that still exist that confuse. I think Bryce and I can relate to this as actors. People still confuse like reality from TV, and up down to like not understanding the way things are just assembled in terms of film and editing, and then down to you would hear those like urban legends of like the little old lady walking up to the soap opera actress in the grocery store and slapping her for cheating on her husband. So as a culture, we don't really know. We do know that mass culture feeds upon itself. We're constantly recycling it, recreating it. It's passed down generation to generation. But I think it's possible. I think Bryce and Riley would agree with this, and maybe this is where you're going, Bryce, that whatever this other element or entity is or intelligence is that is looking down at us, they might be drawing upon some of these archetypes in mass culture to dress themselves up and present themselves to us in a way that we will understand them or find them acceptable.
Yeah.
That I think that I believe that, because I know that's how the spirit world works. They're just energy, so they'll transform themselves into ways we understand. I just wanted to ask because it's one of the arguments people have about that. I've heard a lot.
What do you? Yeah, I'm interested in what Riley and Bryce
Yeah.
think. I'm sorry if I
What do you
stole your
guys
answer,
think?
Bryce.
No, that's okay. I mean, I was just gonna say there is data to back that up. You know, one of the guys who we sort of highly respect in this field is a guy named Jacques Vallée. He was a French astrophysicist and became a famed ufologist, studying case after case. And he pointed out that in the 1800s, there was a mass sightings of these flying dirigibles, like airships. Think of it like the Goodyear blimp. And the people aboard those seemed to be like pirates or buccaneers, and they would send down ropes with anchors and swing from them. And people they would land and they would fix stuff, tinker with their machine, oftentimes like flying saucers do. And it's like Michael said, whatever this phenomenon is, it seemed to be sort of manifesting itself just about 10 to 15 years outside of what our technological capability was, or at least presenting itself in a way that would maybe think like, oh, humans can understand this. I'm going to be a flying airship, and as time goes on, those sightings have changed and manifested into like rocket ships, and now into the flying saucers, and now into who knows, balls of light. So it does seem to be moving and changing and progressing with us as a culture.
Yeah. What do you think, Riley?
I mean, I really like this model of like the archetypes, because I also think it relates back to what I said much earlier about how this is, directly related to our consciousness and our collective consciousness. And so if there's this idea that these archetypes pop up throughout different phases in society that relate to the society that's having these experiences, then that sort of directly relates it back to this idea of some sort of hive mind or collective consciousness, and that this phenomenon is maybe at the source of our consciousness or at the meeting point of the spiritual world and the physical world, or something like that. And so, yeah, I really like that idea of the archetypes and how it plays into society and psychology as a whole.
And I just think too, if it is some sort of futuristic technology, if this is something that's so advanced, we can't wrap our brains around
Right.
Look, we're just Adela and I, before we started this recording, we're talking about video games,
Right.
and we're entering this realm right now where, VR is becoming more and more palatable, and I can get into a virtual world and make myself look however I want to, so why wouldn't an advanced technology be able to do some sort of, like, if you just want to go hard sci-fi, what if they could
Right.
just do some sort of holographic shield cloaking around themselves and hit a button and they look like a leprechaun, hit another button, they look like an alien gray? Or one step further, using some sort of technology that in a Wi-Fi kind of way taps into our unconscious and goes, all right, what's going to be presentable to Adela so she doesn't go running away from me? And sometimes that obviously backfires. Or if they're, I don't know, if there's some sort of like, what do they think alien looks like? I'll present myself as that. And the thing is, the more we as a mass culture agree on what aliens and UFOs look like, which I think is happening more and more,
the more
consistent I think these things are going to present themselves. Because if you go back to the 40s and 50s, when all of this stuff was really starting to take hold, you had all sorts of crazy different aliens. You had ones that looked like robots, you had ones that are like little creatures.
Look at Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And now it all seems to be going more to like, okay, we sort of tend to agree on like 5 or 6 different alien races that we encounter. I don't know.
Yeah. And that gets really interesting.
I agree. Sorry, I was just gonna say I totally believe that concept of that we're all kind of I believe that technology is showing us how these things work. Like VR is a perfect example. Look at right now. Could we have explained this 50 years ago, that we're having a conversation like this and we're seeing each other on a flat screen?
Well, look at Instagram.
Sorry,
filters.
Riley.
Look at Instagram. Instagram filters. You know what I mean? People are making themselves look like talking, glowing dogs on Instagram.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, on the subject of what Michael was saying, I think that opens up this really interesting thing about the role of the perceiver in what they're seeing, and then also the role of the collective perception of what this reality is on that perceiver's perception. So both of those things are coming into play, and then you're being presented with this entity that's then feeding back off of the energy that you're giving it of like, well, how do you see me? And it creates this really kind of interesting setup between those three things, and then we see an alien. And I think Michael really has a point. We have sort of honed in what these things look like in our minds. If you picture an alien in your mind right now, we'd kind of all picture the same thing, so that's.
And I think that's similar to the way that 500 years ago certain cultures, now obviously it wasn't such a global culture back then, but at least locally, let's say Western Europeans were like, we all kind of agree trolls look like this and gnomes look like this and elves look like this. Now, as you spread across the planet, you consistently have those entities. They're just wearing different clothing. But now globally, I think we're all like, yeah, an alien, big eyes, slanted mouth, of course.
Yeah. I mean, there can't be that many different types of Bigfoots, but yet people describe, 50 different ilks of Bigfoot, Another interesting thing too is, I often think all this could just be coming from us. We're at the cradle of understanding extrasensory perception. We know it's real.
Right.
We know stuff like psychokinesis, telepathic powers, psychokinetic energy exists on an individual level. Take that and amplify it.
We know that. We know that for sure.
No, there's so much data that's been done on that it can pretty much be proven. All you got to do is look at it, so that's on the individual level. Now, if we
Oh no!
Froze again.
You imagine what the psychics?
You're too close to the truth. You're too close.
Yeah, they're trying to stop you again, Bryce. They're trying to stop you again.
Am I back on?
You're back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but I just to kind of piggyback off what Riley was saying. Now amplify that times 8 billion, and you have what could be the collective unconscious manifesting psychic phenomena into all these different varieties of what people are experiencing. You know, famous Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, he had no problem with the idea that psychic energy could manifest physically. And what that means is perhaps all this stuff we're experiencing, from Bigfoot to gnomes to elves to aliens, are all coming from us.
I believe that. I mean, I believe that we have much we're capable of that we're not tapped into, and that we can push things out and we can, make things come into fruition. I don't think we've gotten to that point. Like, you know what I'm saying? Where I'm like, okay, I can think of this and picture this and it'll like appear or whatnot. I think we're too afraid of that. So we're not quite there yet. It's the same example I give with spirits, that, we're not quite at Star Wars where Yoda and Obi-Wan can just like hang out with me and I'm talking to him, because we'll get locked up. So that's not going to work out in our world right now, but we're inching our way towards that.
Well, and
right?
if you really want to nerd out on Star Wars, like
no one else saw it. Is that what you're going to say?
I was just saying, like, the final, this past film, episode 9, even dealt with the struggle of being cut off from those entities as well. The very first scene we have with Rey is seeing her sort of at the height of her powers, but she still doesn't know how to communicate with the spiritual side of the Force until she unlocks something within herself,
Well,
and so that's like that. I think
Luke
that's
did, so.
well, but I'm saying that supports. But that supports your what exactly what you're saying is that sometimes, like, we might be at the point, or they might be ready to interact with us in that way, but we're not there yet as a culture.
Bingo. And like some people I know on this video right now.
I don't know who
not
you're
gonna
talking
name.
to.
I'm not gonna name. That leads me to. Wait, which way is it going?
I don't know. Okay, I think it's different for all of us.
Oh, who knows?
Okay.
I mean, I love what we're getting at here, because it gets to the idea that like all of the human minds on Earth are basically nature's supercomputer, and as we create this internet and computers, we're building the hardware to connect up this consciousness supercomputer, and who knows what that's going to lead to. I think we're just in early days of our psychic evolution. We've entered a new phase of evolution. Our body, our hardware is pretty static at this point.
And you have to remember, is even though this sounds so out there, that everything that we interact with in our world, for the most part, with the exception of some of nature, is the result of human thought. The shelves, this poster, these figures, the books behind me, the lamp behind Bryce, all the stuff in the clubhouse where Riley is that we miss so much. That's all manifestation of somebody thinking about making something, and then they make it and it's produced. The clothing that we wear, the microphones that we're using. So in an occult sense, everything that we're surrounded by that's man-made has been willed into manifestation from the unmanifested. So psychically, there's so much further to go, and I think that's why people struggle with like getting stuck in a rut in their personal lives and blah, blah, blah. And I don't necessarily buy all in on the hermetic law of attraction and all that secret bullshit. But I do think that, we are who we think we are. And we, you know what I mean? That there's a way to sort of, if you want to improve yourself or improve the world around you, you sort of have to look within and get in touch with that sort of spiritual side and that idea of like, okay, we have to manifest this. I don't know. I got a little off the rails there, but
no, I think it's perfect, because it's actually a lot of the stuff I talk about over and over. It's nice to have other people, say it, because if I'm saying it, then sometimes when you're doing this work, you're like looked at over here, but I say it all the time. Like when people ask how the spirit world works, I said, they can just think of something and it appears in that realm. We're doing the same thing here, but we got to get a hammer and we got to get stuff and we have to like build it and we have to make it. But it's not any different. It's just there. It just comes through thought energy. It's just the frequency, and the frequency it appears. If we could tap into that, we could learn to do that here. So I agree. I don't believe the secret either. I believe it's like an energy you're pulling that you have to create. Has to kind of
and
right.
sometimes you get swept up in it. It's just like Riley was saying, like we thought about it, we had an experience, we thought about a song, and then 5 days later we had the song and everything was set up and the song was out there, So sometimes you get on those waves where you're like, oh, it does feel like something else is sort of engaging in us to get this created, because the digital world is allowing us to speed things up so much more quickly. It may not be, I may not be able to like immediately have a table and chairs that I want, if I'm a craftsman, but which I'm not, but I can certainly it's much easier for me to go find an episode of Who's the Boss than it would have been 20 years ago, or the next Netflix show. We have so much more access now to digital library, and I think that just goes to show that a lot of
connecting us too,
and
connecting.
It sort of shows that so much of our on demand as human beings is just so entertainment based.
And maybe this integration is what we're destined to do if we're ever going to be a spacefaring society of human beings, because we know this planet won't last forever. We know our nearest star is going to explode eventually. So maybe somewhere trapped in our DNA is this programming to synthesize our psychic consciousness with our materialist ways of thinking, combine them into one and really move into our future selves and start going out into space, which either we're going to have to do eventually or all perish here on Earth.
Or fix the planet. We can fix the planet too.
Listen,
we can do both.
In the interim,
absolutely. But even if we fix the planet, at some point our sun is going to explode. It is this little experiment on Earth isn't going to last forever. And some people think that the idea of this Earth being our placenta, and that it's our role to sort of move out into that, to break that veil and move out into space and far away from here and survive in another realm
and in another form.
Yes, exactly.
10-15 years, you guys can go on the ships. I'll see how you guys do. Make sure that all the technology is perfected, and then I will venture out.
We'll make you some pancakes.
Some pancakes. I have one last question for you guys, and before we wrap up, I believe that these type of subjects are very fringe. I know they're way more popular now. I know over the 17 years of me professionally reading, it is crazy to me how much more popular, because people used to run from me and now people don't. But what have you all experienced when you started this? Like, because this is something I talk a lot about on this channel, about the journey of, because there's a lot of people who watch this who are like new and they're just going into the paranormal, and this is like a new journey. They have like regular jobs and all kinds of things. Some people can't tell their families and things, that the things they're interested in. How have you guys experienced, or what advice do you have for people who are like going into this and going on this journey? Like, do you feel that people around you have reacted differently? Have you felt like you've changed? And in that kind of thing, because it is a journey when you're stepping into this world.
100%. I'll go first. I mean, this is a journey I've been on for as long as I can remember, because I've always been fascinated by things that shouldn't be, and for me, I've always been fascinated with, who are we? Where are we going? Where did we come from? And this all ties into that. All this is related, and it's such a fun journey to go on, to be mystified, to enter the mysterious, and because I'm sure everybody can relate and has had the thought, there's got to be more than this. There's got to be more than to this life than just what we see and feel, and I think that it's such a discovery, and I love it, and I'm so glad we're embracing it. Even our scientists are starting to now, I think embrace it more and more too, looking into new realms like quantum theory and stuff like that. So even science can be mysterious. And so, yeah, it's been an incredible journey and a fun one too.
For me,
Awesome.
it's just the stories. There's so many of these amazing stories. And then also I've noticed since we've started making this show, so many people that I know are like, oh, you're into paranormal? I have a ghost story, or I have a UFO story. And
Right.
everyone starts telling you these stories, and you realize how kind of connected we are in all this. And something we've talked about a lot as we started doing the show is like, are we going to have enough guests that have stories for us? And everyone has a story. And
Even when
Yeah.
they don't have a story, they have
yeah,
a story.
they don't even realize they have a story, and then they realize the story when they start talking about it. They're like, oh, well, actually this one thing. And it all just relates back to these big questions that we're all asking ourselves at some point, of what is this, what are we, and why. And it's just this lens that the paranormal provides, where it just gives you the freedom to think outside of sort of this basic reality structure that you're in constantly, all the time, every day. It just like gives you the freedom to ask these ideas through these stories that are just a lot of fun too. They're funny and they're weird, and it's a good time. And I mean, it's not always a good time. The people have terrifying stories, but going through the stories can be a good time, and it's I also just think, as far as the three of us as friends, like delving into this subject together has been such a cool foundation for a friendship. And this show has really like brought us together, and we feel kind of like we're on this little crusade to ask
Aw.
the big questions, and with the three musketeers or whatever. And that's a great thing. So I mean, as far as what you're asking about, like advice, I think it's just like, just find a community of people to talk about these things with, and share stories and listen to stories, and be free in your thinking to where that's going to take your mind.
Yeah, piggybacking off that, my advice would just be create the thing that allows you to talk about it. That's what we did with this podcast.
Mhm.
A few years ago, before we knew Riley, I knew that I had at least one friend who works in Hollywood that was into this stuff, which was Bryce. And I was super into podcasts, and I thought, well, as someone who wants to create something here in Hollywood, and I'm fortunate enough to work enough that I'm not I mean, I feel like I could always be working more, but I wanted to make something that made me feel productive every week.
Mhm.
And uh and I wanted to also be able to do something with the paranormal and these stories, which is they weren't I wasn't getting cast on the X-Files. I would have died, killed to have been. But it was really like, why don't I just make the show where I get to talk about the thing that I like to talk about, which also has nothing to do with the business, is completely outside of the industry.
Yeah.
So not only will I be able to make something every week, it'll also be an escape from what auditions am I going out for or not going out for. So I would say make the thing, build the platform. Podcasts are such an easy way to do it, honestly. I mean, there is, unfortunately for Riley, there's, physical. Well, look, really,
So easy.
but
Yeah.
also,
Riley's
I
like
mean,
super easy.
but
Yeah.
to be fair, I mean, to be diplomatic about it,
No, it is. It fully is.
Bryce and I are also spending the hours that Riley's putting into editing the show. We're putting
Yeah.
into reading and researching and writing. I'm doing a lot of
Very
writing
true.
every week now too, especially with the Roswell stuff. That really felt like we were taking a step into like writing an audio documentary. I
And
mean,
you
we
did
were
like a little, like people were acting
yeah,
it out. That was cool.
as each
Yeah.
episode went on, and we've been talking about, I think it's okay to tease this, about doing sort of a master cut of the all three parts into one long just the moments of high
Nice.
strangeness, and doing one big super back actors and new actors to play some of the roles, and doing sort of a re-edit of it. um but it's a lot of work, but it's also so much fun, and so I just say that, and just keep an open mind. Don't believe anything.
Yeah.
Don't come in. Don't be
Yes.
aware. Be
Stay open.
wary of anyone who tells you they have the truth and you need to
For
follow
sure.
that.
That's it.
Mhm.
Stay away from that shit. Keep a good sense of humor about it, because you still have to be able to go show your friends and family that you aren't just a UFO nut, that you are also a down to earth person. And the people in your lives who are going to enjoy it will present themselves to you. And like Riley said, share your story, their stories. Everybody else, who cares? They're not,
Yeah.
who cares?
Awesome. That's all perfect and great advice, and also great points, because I say that to people all the time. If you just go and do what you do, people will find you. I'm sure many people have found you guys with your podcast. I'm sure you get lots of emails and inquiries. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I appreciate it on my little channel. Thank you guys for just being so cool about everything. You guys have always been really supportive and awesome. And like I said, don't think, those of you who I get lots of emails from around the country and the world, not everybody's as cool in LA, but Riley apparently is disagreeing.
Well, we're so happy to be here. We love and support you. We think what you do is so incredible, and we all feel you have such a gift, and we admire you for sharing it. And it's been so great to have you as a club member and a friend and a family member of the show, and we just appreciate you. An inspiration. So we thank you.
Wow, thank you.
And I
want to
tell your listeners that if you are looking for that community, come join ours. We would love to have you. The podcast comes out every Wednesday. It's free on all platforms. We do have a Patreon called The Other Side if you want to support the show, and you'll get more bonus episodes over there every month. Patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club. Adela's been on at least one or two of those, I think. But yeah, come listen to Bigfoot Collectors Club. Hang out with us. Follow us on Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club. That's kind of where we engage most with our fans or our listeners. So yeah, every Wednesday we got a new show for you.
All right. Well, Michael did it for me, but I was going to say, is there any place you want people to find you guys? I know for the Bigfoot Collectors Club, where you guys can find them on Instagram, and they're available at all podcasts, but anything else personally?
Bigfoot Pod on Twitter at Bigfoot Pod. And then personally, come follow me on Instagram at McMills with 2 Z's.
Yep. And I'm at Mr. Bryce Johnson.
And I'm at Peace Drone. Or if you're interested in my photos of garbage, I also have an account at Trashbag Hashtag.
I've almost forgotten about the Trashbag Hashtag.
I know, because he has like a regular.
I
know. It's a lot of encouragement to be like, Riley. People, they want to see. They want to see your
trash art.
Like, but my garbage.
He's an artistic soul. He's an artistic soul. Sometimes you gotta like encourage him to be a bit more of a crash commercialist.
Come outside. Come outside.
Put your face out there. Come on. It's a lovely
public.
face.
Oh, thanks,
right.
guys.
Thank you guys so much. Follow yourself. Follow no one. Listen to that inner voice, and I'll see you guys soon.
All right.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.